Hey, it's Jared with Gear and Light. Today I'm going to talk about my experiences so far with the Canon R6. Now, Canon cameras I haven't talked about in quite a while on this channel because I'm primarily a Sony shooter. But this last week I had the opportunity to teach a seminar to high school students on video production. It was a 4-day, all-day long seminar, and I wanted them to have experience both with Sony cameras and with Canon cameras. Several of these students will probably go on to make a camera purchase or utilize cameras more in the future because they really have an interest in creating videos, whether it be YouTube or just creating videos in general. And so I wanted them to have the experience of the two different platforms. I think Canon has really been doing a lot of neat things over the last few years with their mirrorless platform as they've been finding their footing and what people actually want after being a DSLR company for so long and not really innovating too much. So with the Sony cameras, of course, I switched over to Sony back when the A7S came out. Shortly after the A7S, I started kind of moonlighting with Sony. Really liked what Sony was doing with lower light and the sensitivity of the sensor, and so I made the switch, and I haven't really looked back. In 2019, I did have the opportunity to use an EOS R for a little while and get a taste of what Canon was starting to work on, but I wasn't too impressed with the camera itself. But fast forward a few more years, and Canon has really been plugging away at it and coming out with some fantastic cameras, as well as continuously improving upon their lens lineup with the RF lens mount. So with the R6 here, I wanted to talk about some of the things that I find interesting and that I enjoyed about the camera, and then talk about a few things that I think Canon really still needs to address with that platform to move it into the year that we're in right now, which is 2022. I will come back and do a proper comparison of the R6 and the A7 IV, Sony's most recent camera, because I think these cameras are the most direct competitor, though this camera is a bit older than the A7 IV, which just came out. So I'll do that, so make sure to subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications so you'll get notified when that video comes out. I'll also be putting together a full tutorial on how to use this camera, the R6. So obviously there was a lot that I had to kind of relearn and get used to with this camera because the button layout and configuration is a bit different. So as I said, with this R6, I was there to teach kids how to shoot video. And I was there to teach kids how to shoot video in manual mode, because if you've been around here for a while, you know I'm all about manual mode. And if you're shooting any video, manual mode is going to give you the best experience and the best look that you're going for when you use a camera like this. So I pulled this camera out of the box. I rented it, including some other lenses from Lens Pro to Go. I pulled it out of the box. I put a card in it. I switched it back from PAL to NTSC because somebody forgot to reset this thing back to US standards when they used it last. And then we just started shooting. I put it in, of course, 4K so that we could shoot 4K, but I didn't make too many other changes to the camera. I just wanted to see how it would perform with as many default settings as possible, while still, of course, using manual camera controls for aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. So I was quickly reminded of just how much I like Canon's color. Canon's color out of the box is really good, and of course Sony's is as well, and you can customize them, and some people prefer one versus the other. But just out of the box, this R6 performed fantastic with great color in a difficult lighting situation in a room where we just used one light to light our subject. We had some window light, we had some overhead light that we couldn't get rid of, and it just produced a really nice looking image without doing anything else, which I was impressed with. And that's typical of a Canon and my past experiences with Canon cameras. The color is just great out of the box. You don't have to think about it too much. So with this camera, I rented this lens kit that came with the 35mm f1.8. I got the 24 to 70 f2.8, I believe this one is. I got the 15 to 35 f2.8. And then, of course, the 70 to 200, which is just fantastic because it's so short and is just the coolest lens I think I've ever seen as far as a telephoto goes. So with these 4 lenses, we had a lot that we could work with on this this R6. And then I have all of these equivalent lenses for the Sony. So my initial experiences with this camera are that Canon has really started to think through some things that they never used to seem to care about. One of those things being the microphone placement with behind this flappy door here, it being about as far forward and out of the way as it could possibly get. Now, with these microphones, like these different Rode mics and most microphones, they're going to have a 90-degree angle plug on them. And this plug is going to have to plug in somewhere. And most cameras used to have that microphone jack in the way of the flip screen. And so when you try to flip and rotate the screen around, you're hitting the cables. And no longer on this R6 because they put it pretty far out of the way. So even if you have that 90-degree kind of pointing in almost any direction, there is clearance from the screen, which I think is very wise. Sony, even on this particular camera, moved it to the top corner, but if it's pointing down at any direction, it still seems to get in the way. So kudos to Canon for figuring that out and actually just getting it as far out of the way as possible. Now, if you've watched many videos here, you know my thoughts on the flip screen. I both love and hate the flip screen. I hate it more than I love it, but on a camera like this, I definitely find it useful, especially as several of the kids that were in the seminar had an interest in doing some form of vlogging, or they were interested in travel type videos, or something where you're definitely going to have to film yourself at some point. And so having the flip screen come around to the front and then having the microphone jack be out of the way is a huge plus. After getting used to the button configuration again on a Canon, especially the fact that our manual controls are a little bit different, on a Sony, this is for aperture, this is for shutter, and ISO is back here. And on this camera out of the box, it was a little bit different. And so I had to think and had to kind of retrain, and especially as I was explaining camera controls to the kids, help them understand which camera controls go where. But I like how knurled and how easy it is to feel all the camera controls here. A lot of them have a lot of grip on them, and they are at different pitch, some of them, and so they're easy to feel the difference between those buttons. One thing that I didn't like about the buttons is the fact that this lock button right here is so close to the record button. So many times we'd accidentally press the lock button and then we'd go to hit record, and if we didn't pay attention to the record tally on the back of the screen, we might have missed our opportunity to record something. So what I would probably do is remap this lock button to lock focus or something like that if you just held it down like a momentary button, and not have it actually lock the rest of the buttons on the camera because it's just too close to a button that you need, which is that record button. So I'd probably remap that one. A few other things as far as buttons go that were a little bit different to me was just how some of these are not multi-use buttons. Like this dial right here, all you can do is rotate it and hit the center button. There's no pressing it to the side or anything like that. And so there's a lack of buttons still on this platform, although Canon has added a lot more buttons back in after learning a lot of lessons with the EOS R. The EOS R was missing a lot of buttons. I think Canon thought that they can get away with letting everybody use the touchscreen on the back, and the touchscreen is a great experience if you have time to use it. This camera still does have a very nice touchscreen. So if I go into the menu, I can actually tap around in the menu, but what I can't do is use the dial to go up into the menu up at the top here, the menu categories. I have to tap to utilize them, or I just have to push to the side and get all the way through. This is something that Canon has not updated in forever. I remember this menu system from as far back as my Canon 5D Mark III. That's when Canon made kind of a big update to their menu and made a lot of changes to it, but Canon hasn't really changed their menu system in a long time, and that's like, I'm talking over a decade probably. I don't even remember how long ago that was, but it was a long time ago that they updated this menu, and they have not updated it since. Everything is just very old, and I mean, I still remember. It's nice that I still kind of remember where things are, even from being a Canon shooter way back in the day, because there's that consistency there. But there are some functionality things that just are going to make it more usable if they would change them. For me, I hold a camera and shoot it like this. And for me to have to get to the menu, I can get to the right few menus with my thumb, but I then have to take my hand all the way off and go to the back of the camera and utilize it like that. And of course, with the sensor here, that's going to go ahead and activate the EVF. If I get my thumb anywhere near that, then the screen goes off. And so to me, it's just not the best menu experience to maneuver around and try to get to settings quickly. But of course, like most cameras, I can set up my own custom menu with the settings that I most commonly want to access. So while it's not my favorite thing, the menu, it's still usable. It's consistent. If you've used a Canon, you can use their menu because they're all pretty much the same. So other than that, I was just really impressed with the quality of the image that this camera had. To be honest, most of the kids preferred shooting with the Canon. Some of the girls preferred shooting with the Sony because it was a little bit smaller and more compact, and I think that was really the only reason. It didn't have anything to do with the image or anything other than the fact that it was just a little bit more compact. And really, there's not too much of a difference here, and it might have been also just lens choice as well. They might have been preferring to shoot with the 35 as opposed to having something heavier like the 24-70 on the camera. All of those students, being relatively new to shooting photo and video, didn't have a whole lot of feedback on which camera they preferred. It was more of me watching how they were using the cameras, finding the things or recognizing the things that they were getting stuck on, and then looking at all the footage and that we were able to capture together as they learned how to use the cameras. And that really told me, like, from a beginner, from a true beginner, someone who has no experience with cameras like these, I think it was a little bit easier for someone to pick up a Canon and start shooting with the Canon than with the Sony. The Sony, especially the A7R4, has a lot more buttons and options, and this camera can seem a little bit more complex just because of all of that. But once the camera is set, once the settings are set, there really is no difference in using them. So I will come back and do my comparison between these two cameras. I'll also do an in-depth tutorial, as I do with a lot of the other cameras on the R6, because this is a popular camera. It's a fantastic camera. I really don't recommend anybody getting into a DSLR anymore. A camera like this, if it is in your budget, is a fantastic option. And there's not much that I dislike about this camera other than the old menu system and perhaps a lack of buttons, just being that the dial doesn't do anything other than rotate. Some of the buttons just aren't really that usable. So I wish some of the buttons were a bit more multifunctional. So I'm going to come back soon, not only with those videos that I talked about, but also with a settings video for this camera. I did go in and do my typical settings to this camera to get it customized for my shooting style, and I like to share those settings with everybody as well. So if you're interested in that, make sure you subscribe to the channel, click the thumbs up on this video, turn on notifications, and if you're interested in learning more about this camera, make sure to check out the links down in the description below. I've got links to the SD cards that I used, the microphone, and a couple of these lenses as well, as they're all fantastic lenses for this camera. But as I tell a lot of people, before purchasing and spending a lot of money on a lens, if you're not sure if you're going to need it or if it's maybe the right lens choice for you, definitely go and rent. And Lens Pro To Go is an excellent option for that. They had these this whole camera package delivered to me in a couple of days. I was able to utilize it all week for my students, and I'll be able to utilize it all of this next week for myself, which is why I decided to rent this camera setup so that I could just dip my toe back in the Canon pool and see what life is like over on that side of the fence. So that's going to do it for this video. I hope you found this useful. If you have any questions about the R6, any of these lenses, or of course some Sony stuff, ask down in the comment section below. I'd love to continue the conversation with you there, but that's going to do it for this video. Thanks so much, and I hope to see you back in another one soon. Take care.